Welcome back, guys. We are in part 2 of Drifting Toward Disunion. And in the last section, the last part, the first video lesson for this chapter, we talked about kind of some of the things that happened in May of 1857, a congressman beating another congressman, a fight in Congress, a massacre of by John Brown in Kansas, and just kind of the boiling point, and things continue to get worse and worse. And now we're going to talk about Abraham Lincoln, because the question that we ended the last section was what is the boiling point? We're going to answer that in this lesson, part 2. The boiling point is Lincoln's election. Now, let's talk about Lincoln for a little bit. Lincoln was born in a one-room cabin, a log cabin, a house made out of trees. That just logs. They just took the log and laid it, and then another log and laid it, and this way and this way, and that's what kind of house he grew up in. And he only ever went to the first grade. That's it, first grade. He grew up on the frontier, meaning kind of out in the middle of nowhere, in Kentucky, what is now Kentucky, Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. And he does become a lawyer, but not because he went to school, it's because he taught himself. And he was 28 years old in 1837 when he became a lawyer. And he was against slavery, but he was for the United States staying together. Now, if we look at this map on the next slide, it says 1860. And we can see in 1860 what the presidential election results were. And really what I want to point out here is that no one in the South voted for Lincoln. All of his votes came from the western states, California and Oregon, and the northern states. No one in the South voted for Lincoln. Looking at the next slide, it says 1860. On December 20, immediately after Lincoln was elected, the state of South Carolina seceded from the Union. That means that they left the Union. They said that they left the Union. Of course, you can't take a saw and cut your state out of the United States and then move it out into the ocean. But they claimed that they were no longer part of the United States. Other states followed. And by February, they created what we call today what they called also the Confederate States of America, or CSA for short. And Jefferson Davis was elected as president of the Confederacy. President Buchanan was a Democrat, so he would remember Democrats are in the South, but he's from the North. But he does nothing to stop secession. He says, I respect nothing but the law, which means that the South Carolina can secede. President Lincoln-elect, we call him President-elect because he's not yet in office, but he has been elected. President-elect Lincoln and his advisors could do nothing because he's not yet the president. And he didn't want to do anything while Buchanan was president. He wanted Buchanan to solve this. And so the Civil War actually begins on Buchanan's watch when he is president. In March of 1861, Lincoln is inaugurated. And so in the United States, after an election, today the election is November and the person is inaugurated or becomes president in January. But it used to be December and March. And so, November and March. And so on March 4, after waiting from November, December, January, February, so he's waited 4 or 5 months to become president. And then finally he becomes president. So he's inaugurated. At that point, James Buchanan leaves office. Now, James Buchanan, he was there under, he was a Democrat under Bloody Kansas. And we can see the next slide, a little profile about him. He's for states' rights, and we looked at that previously. On the next slide, we see Abraham Lincoln is from Kentucky and Illinois. His party is Republican, and he is in office from 1861 to 1865. And of course, the big issue for Abraham Lincoln is slavery. And the Civil War. Now, this is the boiling point when Lincoln becomes president. And at this moment, and after, in the next 3 or 4 months, after he is elected president, but before he becomes president, when he's developing his new advisors and beginning to set up government, but before he takes over, the South is boiling. This is the boiling point. And several states secede. Now in April, the next month, the war begins. And that's what we're going to talk about in the next chapter. See you guys then. Bye-bye.